what are the self-review techniques for your NEBOSH IG2 risk assessment project before even you submit to your learning partner. You know, we all know there are a certain kind of criteria. Like in Sadara, mashallah, you have hiring criteria for each position. And I'm sure you don't compromise. Same way, NEBOSH also have defined some of the criteria for IG1 and IG2. For IG2, they have given a kind of exemplary IG2 risk assessment format. And all the 4 sections we have to fill according to their expectations. Whatever project or company we are working in, we benchmark the kind of risk assessment scope of that project. Could be any, could be 3 processes, maybe 4 processes, maybe 1 complete project, or maybe the complete Sadara company itself. It's up to you, but definitely you need to define the scope of your project. And usually the trainees, you know, they complete the project brilliantly, I would say, but they don't compare. They don't compare their work with NEBOSH requirements, with the NEBOSH standards, you know. Like one way, I'm gonna share the IG2 project kind of example, well shared by NEBOSH as well. And once you complete your risk assessment project, make sure you compare the both formats, like your work and the work done by NEBOSH itself as an example. And each portion, each column, each cell, each word, I would say, you need to compare and evaluate either it is the work well done according to the NEBOSH expectations, or you are violating some of the requirements, or ignoring, or not meeting, you know, not meeting up the certain requirements actually. That is why I added the word self-review techniques for your NEBOSH IG2 risk assessment project before even you submit your learning partner. No doubt, it's every activity is kind of a time bound. Like if you submit your project before 25th of November, let's take an example. Our certification department will definitely keep you updated. And before you submit, double check over and over, and keep adding. We will share the Word format with you while you are typing, and even your project is completed, still keep it with you, you know. Don't submit immediately. Don't be so much hasty just in submission actually. Keep that format with you, and every day find some time and review it and improve. Because I hope you remember the biggest room in the world is the room for further improvement. So find different points every day and make sure you improve your risk assessment project even much better than NEBOSH requirements also. That should be our target, right? NEBOSH have mentioned certain requirements, but our target should be to make it more attractive, more standardized, and see the result, inshallah. So let's move on. There is a straightforward criteria, the kind of requirements I would say, that you will complete a risk assessment of your organization and make sure you must find and record at least 10 different hazards. 10 different hazards that are taken at least from 5 different hazard categories. For the avoidance of doubt, hazard categories for this assessment are the topic heading for elements 5 to 11. Like element 1 to 4, the management system. Mostly the answers we are getting from element 1 to 4 for IG1. Even in line with the scenario, we are bound to give answers. But we are getting help from element 1 to 4 for IG1. But 5 to 11 is entirely relevant to IG2, which is like hazards, associated risks, and some sort of control, mean complete, a hierarchy of control, and different examples of good controls against several hazards mentioned by NEBOSH theories. Now look at, we have element 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and there are hazard categories. We have hazard categories like noise, vibration, radiation, mental ill health, violence at work, substance abuse, work-related upper limb disorder like ergonomics, workstation design, manual handling, load handling equipment, hazardous substances, health, welfare, and work equipment like working at height, confined space, lone workers, slips and trips, movement of people and vehicle in the workplace, work-related driving, work equipment and machinery, fire, electricity. So what is the criteria? 10 different hazards from 5 different hazard categories. And from each category, at least you can take 2 kind of risk or hazards, which you're going to elaborate into your IG2 risk assessment project. So assessment criteria produce a risk assessment of a workplace which consider a wide range of identified hazards drawn from 5 to element of the IG syllabus and meets best practice standards and suitable and sufficient. So the again straightforward criteria, make sure your assessment is suitable and sufficient. Whatever you are writing there and suggesting some sort of controls or evaluating the hazard and who might be harmed, you are writing something and you are making it time bound by putting some comprehensive additional controls, and those controls you are trying to make time bound, and also you are writing who is responsible to complete that one in the right pattern, in line with your project scope for risk assessment. So, but bear in mind the word suitable and sufficient, not so less, not so much. That means again straightforward. So let me just open one file which will help you to understand all 4 segments. Just a moment, please. That I'm going to share the checklist. I will share it in the WhatsApp group also, inshallah. Let me share that one. So what you can do is, while you are preparing your risk assessment project, print that checklist. Print that checklist, which I'm going to share in WhatsApp also. Because in the checklist, don't tick until you are 100% sure that the requirements are well met. And look at, you may wish to use this checklist to help you make sure that you have covered the minimum criteria for IG2 assessment. That means the minimum criteria. The maximum, it's up to you how much you want to improve. Even comparing to NEBOSH, there is no boundary for improvements. You can write much better than NEBOSH also. Like I will share one format from given by NEBOSH for IG2 assessment. It's already completed one. So I will share as an example. Now the part 1, 4 parts are there, like part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. For each part there are some checkpoints. Like make sure the description includes what? The name of the organization. Make sure you are mentioning that. If you want to keep it confidential, then any name, maybe ABC or maybe any name which is not existing. But if there is a sign of confidentiality, you need to follow. Then the site location as well. Make sure it is there in the part 1. Number of workers employed. And the general description includes products manufactured, services offered, like, kind of a profile, brief profile of that company. What exactly they are doing and what kind of products and services they have, and their types of activities and shift patterns. Do they have only 1 shift or 2 shifts or maybe 3 shifts, What I mean is these information you have to make sure in part 1 of your risk assessment project. Now, the description of the area to be included in the risk assessment. What are the areas you are going to put in the risk assessment or going to conduct the risk assessment? Methodology used to include like sources of information, who was consultant, and how you decided on the additional control measures. So methodology, your general methodology, like a kind of a method statement, how you completed that assessment. Like we have a method statement against several activities and processes. So same way for risk assessment project, make sure you clearly write your methodology, which is kind of a sources of information, and who was consultant. You met with the managing director, you met with general manager, or the safety director, or the safety manager, corporate safety manager, or supervisor, or operation manager, project manager, whosoever. While completing this assessment, to whom you have consulted, and how you decided on the additional control measures. I'm sure you will find several areas. Oh, existing controls are not sufficient. Still, you are suggesting some additional controls. So make sure you are making it time bound and writing who is responsible for that one. Now, the part one. What I mean is, don't take until that requirement is completed in part one. Now, part two is risk assessment, like minimum of 10 hazards. And the identified hazards are taken from at least 5 hazard categories, which are highlighted before. And each column of the risk assessment table has been completed for each of the identified hazard. Each column of so that means no missing column. Every column you have to fill for sure. Each column of the risk assessment table has been completed for each of the identified hazards. That is part number 2. And that part, again, if you go back and see your SADARA risk matrix register, or maybe one master register, or maybe several risk assessment registers would be available, process-wise, area-wise, material-wise, department-wise, or project-wise, whatsoever. But make sure you consult with them, and that part 2 would be more easier for you, inshallah, especially to fail, inshallah. Now, part 3 is prioritize 3 actions with justification for the selection. Like you suggested several additional controls, so at least select 3 actions with the justification for the selection. And what checkpoints are there? Like 3 actions have been selected. Out of all the actions, you selected top 3, which have a magnitude in a positive way. Like if these 3 actions you complete, an excellent impact would be there in the organization, a much better value addition or optimization, or keeping that process is more safer, within that organization. Now, that justification includes, but these 3 actions, how are you going to justify? Based on moral. They have defined the criteria. You have to give justification that those actions are important in shape of moral, legal, and financial arguments. Likelihood and severity considered for each action. And likelihood and severity, what is the criteria, based on what factors you need to decide. The number also. Description of how effective the action will be in controlling the risk for each action. Description of how effective the action will be in controlling the risk for each action. I repeat again, description of how effective the action will be in controlling the risk of each action. So we have to bring that risk at acceptable level, at negligible level, or as low as reasonably practicable. So your actions you need to justify. How come you're going to say these 3 actions will bring a lot of risk to the acceptable level, or maybe to the negligible level, or as at least alert, as low as reasonably practicable. That is relevant to part 3. So part 3 means only justification, legally, morally, and financially. Like we gave argument in scenario what I shared in IG1, give financial arguments to convince your management that safety is important. Why safety have to be considered important in our business operations? No, the part 4 is review, communicate, and check. Again, some checkpoints are there. Make sure there is a realistic review, date given. When you are going to review the same risk assessment, a reason for review, date given. Like if you gave, I'm implementing those actions, and I will review that risk assessment maybe after 1 month, maybe after 2 months, 3 months. But again, you have to justify that time limit. Like if you're going to say, I will review after 1 year, but realistically, it is not acceptable, and technically, logically, it's not good as per the best practices even. So make sure the realistic review date you are going to give, and you have to give the reason why you are going to review even after 1 month, or after 2 months or 3 months as per the planned actions. Now, the third is indicate how the risk assessment findings will be communicated, indicate who the risk assessment findings will be communicated to, indicate how you will follow up to check that the identified actions have been carried out. So these 3 points, again, you don't tick until you double check. That is why the self-review of your risk assessment project is so much important. Like, indicate how the risk assessment findings will be communicated, indicate who is the risk assessment findings will be communicated to, indicate how you will follow up to check that the identified actions have been carried out. So the follow-ups. So I will share, inshallah, this checklist also in the WhatsApp group. It would be a great help, inshallah. You just print it up and make sure you don't check until that particular requirement is well met in your project, inshallah. Okay, so I'll share in the WhatsApp group. Now let's discuss the one good example given by NEBOSH itself, because any other example we can't share, to be very honest, we are not allowed. But the example given by NEBOSH, of course, it is for your better understanding. So let me share that one, inshallah. So, to be very honest, I truly need to remember where I have saved that one. Okay, so I have training material, the NEBOSH IGC, and yes, I'm going to share the IG2 risk assessment example as per NEBOSH, inshallah. And the set criteria, the checklist, I'm going to share also in the group, and I will share that example as well. So you can compare your project accordingly, inshallah. But your effort should be to make much better than even NEBOSH, that project. So let me just open and share. It's done. Is it visible to everyone, please? It is direct from the NEBOSH for our awareness, for our understanding. Declaration is quite clear. By submitting this assessment 1 to 4 part for marking, I declare it is entirely my own work. And I understand that falsely claiming, the work is my own, it's kind of a malpractice, of course, which is not acceptable, and can lead to NEBOSH imposing severe penalties. See the NEBOSH malpractice policy for further information. You can go to NEBOSH website and you can study the malpractice policy. Important note, you must refer to the document Unit IG2 risk assessment guidance and information for learners, like we are giving all sort of information. Now let's discuss part 1. It is all about background of that project, at that company, that processes you are having in your scope to conduct risk assessment. Now part 1 is all about, you should aim to complete this section like 150 to 200 words. So criteria is again straightforward. 150 to 200 words. Not like 2000 words, Writing so many lengthy stories will not work really well in our favor, What is the name of the organization? Well, like they mentioned, International General Garage. Site location, a made-up country, or number of workers, 24. And these are the checkpoints even in the checklist. So make sure you fill that one. Then what is the general description of the organization? Most of the general description you can get even from the website of your company or any your safety manual. Always there is an introduction or general description of the organization. What are you doing? What type of products or services you are providing to the market? Like ISCG is a medium-sized garage with offices, vehicle repair shop, including stores, paint spray booth. It's a family-owned and does not have any other branches. So what they do? Repairs and maintenance. Okay, so and also they are serving, carrying number of the public, like typical activities undertaken, moving spare parts from the stores to the workshop, engine repairs. So we're talking about their sort of business processes, body repair, draining fuel, oil spray booth, etc. The garage also operate 8 to, so we are telling the timing as well, like about the shift, how many shifts they have, and what are the timing. The garage operates from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays and is closed at the weekends. Workers are only required to work 7 hours per day. So there are staggered, start and finish time in place. So this is the fourth row we completed. Then description of the area to be included in the risk assessment. The risk assessment will cover the garage. So this is the area where you have to include, the areas to be covered in that risk assessment. The risk assessment will cover the garage, like that includes storage area, the spray booth, activities, the office, and a separate risk assessment. Now, any other relevant topic? No doubt, you can mention the finance director who reports directly to the managing director has directly responsibility for health and safety. Like in Sadara, you can say safety director who reports directly to the CEO or the president or the managing director has direct responsibility for health and safety. So if you are worried about confidentiality, you can invent a false name and location for your organization, but all other information provided must be factual. So your part 1 is near to complete. The last portion is you should aim to complete the section 100 to 200 words. Note, this section can be completed after you have completed your risk assessment. Once your risk assessment is completed, then that section will be more easier to fill rather than proactively you are writing that one. Because once you completed your project, then it would be more easier to whom you met, how you completed a risk assessment project, how many professionals you met in different departments. You can give the whole background of your project, like especially sources of information you consulted, and who you spoke to, and how you identified what the hazards, what is already being done, and any additional controls actions that may be required. So the story started with, I started by looking if the ILO had any codes of practice related to garage work, because here he mentioned, the garage work, which there wasn't. The British HSC website had lots of resources, for example. So you are giving your references as per your research and understanding, just as per the risk assessment scope actually. Either that scope is covered in any international standards, so you can give those links. After looking at sources of information, I then went around the workshop and talked to the people who were doing the job. This helped me to identify hazards, and this, for example, a lot of workers didn't know there were dust masks available for the reason. So you start highlighting some positive stories, then some opportunities for improvement or kind of observation, and you wrap up this section, with 100 to 200 words. That is all about part 1 of your risk assessment project. Part 2 is realistically what exactly the hazard category you identified, and because of, like they gave an example, hazardous substances, hazard category and hazard. And what is the hazard? Dust, high concentration of processed dust in the air. Who might be harmed and how? All workers, customers, and other visitors. Like high concentration of process, you are giving justification also. How come those workers could be harmed? Because who might be harmed and how? I repeat again, who might be harmed and how? This how should be. I noted, people don't give importance sometimes the critical words actually. Like he clearly mentioned who might be harmed. So it's not like just you're gonna mention, all visitors, customers, and this or the relevant. If it's a welding project or welding department, only the welding operators or the helpers or something like that. But how are they going to be harmed actually? That technical justification should also be within this column, and you have to mention that one. Then the third column is who are you, what are you already doing actually? Like your existing controls. What are you already doing? For what? To control these hazards. Like your hierarchy, your existing hierarchy of control, what exactly you are performing and doing. If it is not sufficient, like dust mask available, but it is not mandatory that these are worn actually. So existing control, quite straightforwardly, we can understand they are not sufficient. So what further controls actions are required? So you started with the numbers. Bear in mind, you started with the numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just you are, because you are not happy with the existing control. So you are the one going to suggest further controls actions which are required, like enclosed area to be set up for sanding, grinding operations, including that will include a suitable local exhaust ventilation system, purchase of on-tool dust extraction system, use of face mask. Now you are getting help from your study material also. So based on that, make sure you make them time bound. Each number, how much time it will take, and who is responsible for that, like workshop manager, or what actions he is responsible for. All the actions related to, it's mentioned here, like up to 14. Out of 14, how many relevant to the workshop manager, and how many are relevant to the finance director, because he is overall responsible for health and safety. Then store manager, like 3B and 12 and 13. So accordingly, we have to make them time bound as well as designated person. So 10 different hazards we need to describe here from 5 different categories, and you complete that portion. And for that portion, your existing risk register of that company or project would be very much beneficial, but still might be the existing control you believe, as per your current study for the last 10 days, you believe it's not sufficient. Still some more controls can be implemented, and you become like innovative, and you believe the biggest room in the world is the room for further improvement. So might be you can suggest few still additional controls and make them time bound, and also who is responsible for that one. Same way, like you take noise, or you take slips and trips, working at height, at least 10 hazards from 5 different categories, and you complete your that portion, part number 2. And also you check mark your IG2 assessment checklist, like here, which I'm going to share in the WhatsApp group, inshallah. So what is the part 3? The prioritization, like 3 actions, and you have to justify the selection. What is the criteria? Suggested word count, moral, general, legal, and financial arguments for all actions, 300 to 350 words. And for each action, there are some, again, specific words, like specific legal arguments, 100 to 150 words. Guys, we can't violate the NEBOSH criteria actually for that project. We can't violate. The more violations we're going to have, or we ignore, or we misunderstood sometimes, God forbid, the requirements of NEBOSH. That is why I made the topic how you have to self-review your project along with this standardized format of NEBOSH, and I'm sharing the checklist as well. Like for moral or legal argument, 100 to 150 words, likelihood and severity, 75 to 150 words, and how effective the action is likely to be controlled in controlling the risk, like 100 to 150 words. And then you start writing long stories, for general, legal, and financial arguments for all actions. You get help from ILO, you give reference from OSHA, you take reference from different regulatory, legal, international bodies, including from some sort of globally acceptable NGOs even your internal system. Sadara itself is a global brand, so mashallah, you can also give your references, in sort of kind of moral, general, and legal financial arguments. And of course, you have given the references of Saudi legal laws, or maybe your customer defined standards, especially Saudi Aramco itself is a law actually. Like in this portion, they gave a reference as they have legal requirements to protect its workers under ILO C155, clear responsibilities. So here you require research. That is why I shared with you the register already shared in Excel, in WhatsApp, and that would be helpful. Even some other links, inshallah. And these portions require the reference. You can't write simple stories without reference. As a safety leader, as a safety professional, we can't talk, we can't suggest even any control without a solid reference, or without a solid technical reference, okay. And it would be hard for us to be going for argument. Now we have to justify for each action why we are selecting this action, what is the reason behind. We have to give specific legal argument, and also the likelihood and severity should also be explained actually, and how effective the action is likely to be in the controlling the risk, like explanation to include, and the intended impact of the action, justification for the time scale that you indicated in the risk assessment, and where you think the action will fully control the risk. So again, explanation of your action, like action is purchase a mobile bridge to allow mechanics to be able to safely access both sides of the inspection, fit when working at ground level, hazard category working at height, and specific legal argument as per ILO or R164 recommendation or convention 1 C155 part 4 is saying recommendation specifically state that the undertaking organization must provide the maintain workplaces, machinery and equipment, the use work methods, and the safe work without the risk to health is reasonably practicable. So you are justifying your argument with legal grounds actually, like a lawyer. The lawyer always gives some solid argument based on legal laws or some solid references for sure. So consideration of likelihood and severity, the likelihood of injuries occurring from working in and around the inspection pit is very likely. This is due to the inspection pit. So what I'm going to suggest, since I'm sharing this format as well, so get time, study, and I'll share the Word format as well, where you have to complete your project. So complete each portion, compare with this format, then complete next part, again compare with this standard format, and you also have a checklist, and I'm sure inshallah you will do much better than inshallah NEBOSH also. I'm claiming that one because you are working with Sadara. You are a big name, guys, mashallah. So create something more productive, and let NEBOSH also to learn something from the global brands like Sadara, mashallah. Okay, and they are also ready to learn, by the way, because no one is perfect in this world. Now, justification for action 2, like action in closed area to be set up for sanding, grinding, operating, like this is another action. Again, legal argument as per ILO C155. So make sure you can legally justify. Legal reference is the most solid reference, and if that legal standard is globally respected, it's more solid. Like ILO, International Labor Organization, mostly all countries are member of ILO. So technically, it is more sound, You are giving global references. And same way, you have to explain likelihood and severity, why you are saying, why you selected this action, what is the likelihood, how terrible consequences going to be there in response to the likelihood as well. And then the third action. So 3 actions you have to complete in part 3 actually. You need to prioritize 3 actions and justify this action. Then the last portion of risk assessment is all about review, communicate, and check. Review, communicate, and check. What are the suggested planned review date or period I'm responding for this 50 to 100 words? How the risk assessment findings will be communicated and who needs to know the information 100 to 150. Follow up on the risk assessment like 100 to 150. So each portion, again, you are writing stories like company policy is to review risk assessment at least every 12 months. So you are writing the long stories and sharing, why that planned date you are justifying. I therefore set the review date to be no later than 13th of July 2021. However, I will make sure that this will be reviewed before this day. If there is any new equipment for working, procedures brought in, a change in relevant legislation, you will review it, or significant changes. Again, bring some study what you have gone through for the last 10 days. How the risk assessment finding will be communicated and who. I will arrange a meeting with the finance director because that he was overall responsible for safety to go through, assign the actions to the risk, and also will be emailed initially with follow-up meetings if required, the findings of the workers on the actions, and also the summary of the risk assessment and actions to be taken will also be posted on the company internet that all workers have access to. Intranet, not internet. So inside internal network, I will set diary reminders for roughly 10 days before. How you will follow up on the risk assessment to check that the actions have been carried out. So you giving justify, like I will set diary reminders for roughly 10 days before the action is due to be completed. I will speak to the responsible person for each of the actions to find out the progress against every action. Should the action not be on target for completion, I will find out. According to me, before 10 days, to be very honest, it's not realistically better justification. Like if there is an action, like and you gave 6 months, and you are giving a reminder before 10 days, it's not like so. According to the planned date you have given for that action, make sure you set a number of reminders. And no harm, that is our, we are a supportive department, we are a services department, we are an advisory department. So no harm to and no shame to be very honest, give reminders, maybe 2 3 politely, not aggressively, not over emotionally actually, but yes, polite reminders, no harm to give to the relevant department. So through that, we can create some seriousness in their minds, and inshallah, we'll achieve those actions on time. Otherwise, if you gave 6 months to complete one action and you are giving a reminder just before 10 days, like after 5 months and 20 days, it is not, but this is just an example, okay? So make sure you have your learner number there and learner name, and total 19 pages. So I will share 3 documents, as I mentioned. One, this IG2 example, and one document as a checklist for risk assessment project, and few more, legal links actually, like the register, which I'm sure I already shared you. So this is, guys, from my side. If there is any confusion, I'm still there. Anytime, contact me. I'll be more than happy to support, inshallah. And good luck. And I truly want you all to be more successful, inshallah, in your life. And this is, the fruit of your 10 days, great efforts, mashallah, for learning. And now the fruit should come with better marks, better excellence as a safety leader at your projects within Sadara, inshallah. Bring drastic improvements and let the Sadara management see that now you are entirely a different individual brand as a safety leader, inshallah. And be ready to achieve both exams, IG1 and IG2. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So nice of you. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Feel free to contact me anytime, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ishtiaq. Thank you for the time you spent with us explaining deeply, and thank you for this great experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So nice of you, my friend. Thank you very much for your kind feedback and motivation, inshallah. The biggest room in the world is the room for further improvement. So I'll still be a great learner, inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you.